Good morning, church. It's good to see all of you here. I know there's some that aren't here with us, and we always are saddened when they're not able to be here for whatever reason, but it also means we get to look forward to when we get to see them again. This morning, we're going to be continuing on our lesson series that we've been talking about from the Sermon on the Mount. And as some of you might be sighing in relief, it's coming to a close. Say, I've only got a couple more lessons for you tonight, this morning being one of them. And we're going to be coming down to a summary of everything that's been talked about. Because from the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has been trying to advise us, trying to teach us, trying to help us to understand what it means to truly live a righteous life, what it truly means to be a disciple of His, what it truly means to live a life approved of by God, if you remember the very beginning of everything we've been talking about. So this morning we're going to come towards the close in Matthew chapter 7. Verses 7 through 12 is where we'll be focusing our minds this morning. But we're going to be looking at this summary that he is trying to give, this way that he gives us examples on how we ought to live and how we ought to act towards others. And in just these few verses in Matthew chapter 7, he gives us this summary on how we ought to live. After everything he's already said, he kind of gives an overlay of, now that I've said all that I've said, I've tried to explain it to the best of my ability. Let me one more time tell you or help you understand how to live as a disciple of Christ, how to live as a person, as a human being, someone created by God. So that's what we're going to be focusing on this morning. We're going to focus on verses 7 through 11 in the first section. And we're going to be talking about persevering as a disciple of Christ. But really the focus is the idea that this section teaches us how to focus our lives on God. I don't know if you noticed the slide that was up here before we started our lesson when Ricky was up here giving the announcement. But that is the passage we're going to be looking at. Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 through 8 is what was up there. It says this: "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened." It's a powerful message. Even though it might seem simple, it might not seem like it's saying a whole lot. But in this, it has a huge summary of everything that he has been talking up to this point. Everything he's been getting onto. So let's get into it. One of the things we want to make a note of is the continuous action of the Greek present tense. And I know I try to stay out of the Greek as much as I can for you, but at some point it helps to understand what it's getting at here, what this Greek present tense is trying to do. And this is an emphatic and imperative. This is a command statement where he says to keep asking, keep knocking. That is what the idea of the present tense is that you keep asking. You don't just ask once. Don't just ask one time. You keep asking and it'll be given to you. You keep seeking and you will find it. You keep knocking and the door will be open to you. When you become a Christian, you don't just stop at the time where you get baptized into Christ. This is a continuous thing, the way you live. That is what he's getting at here. This is a continuous thing. You keep asking, you keep knocking, you keep seeking. All of these things you keep doing. And one of the things that you might find kind of neat is the fact that it correlates right back to Matthew 5:6. If you don't remember, it says this: "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, for they shall be satisfied." What did it say here? If you ask, it will be given to you. If you seek, you will find. If you knock, it will be open to you. This says if you hunger and thirst, guess what? You're going to be satisfied. Guess what those hunger and thirst words are? You guessed it, it's the Greek present tense. If you keep hungering for righteousness, if you keep thirsting for righteousness, that is when you are satisfied. It's not just about hungering one time in your life. It's not just about thirsting one time in your life. But it is the way that you live your life every single day. You keep hungering for God. You keep thirsting for God. You keep hungering and thirsting for righteousness, for Christ. And what the summary is getting at is that you keep asking, you keep seeking God in your life, you keep knocking at the door. Because the day is going to come when that door will be opened. And that'll be a wonderful day, won't it? So Jesus actually applied these principles pretty well throughout his ministry. Both of these passages come from Luke. This first one here is from Luke chapter 11. I think verses 5 through 8, if I remember correctly. It said, "Then he said to them, suppose one of you has a friend and goes to him at midnight and says to him, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves, for a friend of mine has come to me from a journey, and I have nothing to set before him.' And from inside he answers and says, 'Do not bother me. The door has already been shut, and my children and I are in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything.' I tell you, even though he will not get up and give him anything because he is his friend, yet because of his persistence, he will get up and give him as much as he needs." Persistence, in case you didn't know, is a synonym for perseverance. That's what we're talking about here. We got to be persistent in our Christian walk, in our Christian life. We have to keep doing these things. I mean, I don't know how many of you would look a friend in the face, or if a friend showed up at your house at midnight. I mean, you might be a little irritated if you had to get out of bed. But I don't know how many of you, if you had a friend that showed up at the door, would not help them. That's what we're talking. We're talking about someone who, he's a friend, but he won't even open the door to help him. He doesn't help because he's a friend. He helps because he won't go away. He won't stop. He keeps doing it. It's the message that Jesus is trying to get across of how we are to live as Christians. We have to persevere. We have to be persistent. We have to continue doing these things. This continuous action throughout our lives. And then again in Luke chapter 8 chapter 18 verses 1 through 8, I just have verse 1 up there. He says, "Now he was telling them a parable to show them that at all times they ought to pray and not lose heart," talking about persistence, talking about perseverance. If you know the rest of this parable, it's the parable that a lot of people like to call the persistent widow. This is the widow who's going to the judge, who doesn't care about he doesn't care about God, he doesn't fear God, and he's not a respecter of any man. So he's kind of an evil judge, or a bad judge, so to speak. And this widow keeps going to him saying, "I need protection from my enemies, from those who oppose me. I need protection." And over and over and over and over and over and over she goes to him. And finally he tells him, "It's not because I want to give this to you or that I think you deserve it, but it's because I don't want you to bother me anymore." That's what he's saying. It is out of her persistence. This widow got what she needed from the judge. One who didn't fear God, who didn't care about anybody else. But her persistence, her perseverance got her through it, even if she had hard times. So we can see that Jesus applied this in his ministry, and you can find other examples. These are just 2 that I like, that I pulled out for you. But then it goes on, if we go through the rest of this section in verses 9 through 11, he then goes and gives illustrations of this right here in the context. In verse 9, he says, "Or what man is there among you who, when his son asks for a loaf, will give him a stone?" I don't know how many have ever been asked for something from their children in this room. I would guess anyone who has a child, any of you who has a child at all, was probably asked for things the moment the child came to life, out of the womb. It's probably already begging for food. But if your kid comes to you and he says, "I'm hungry, I need a loaf," how many of you would give him a stone? The answer is pretty self-evident. Nobody would do that to their kid. Nobody would give them something that they don't need when they need something important. No one would give them that. And there's some really cool connections that you can make here. It might be simply that the stone and the loaf of bread are round in shape, is why Jesus uses this particular illustration. But you can also potentially connect this back to chapter 4 in Matthew, where he is getting tempted. And the devil says, "Turn these stones into bread." He's using an experience out of his own life to illustrate this lesson for us. Jesus is trying to help us understand what this means. And then in verse 10, he says, or if he asked for a fish, still talking about the son asking the father, he will not give him a snake. It's very similar in the stance that he's asking for something that he needs. He's asking for food. He's asking for help in that sense. And so the answer would be the same. Of course, no father is going to give a kid who wants food a snake. The extra here is that before he was asking for something he needed, and the father gave him something that didn't help. Now not only is he asking for something he needed, but the father is giving him something that could potentially cause him harm rather than help him. Of course, a father would not do that. Why would a father ever do that to his child? So he finally gets to the last little part of that illustration in verse 11. He says, if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give what is good to those who ask him? How much more? He's not trying to say that, we need to think of ourselves as horrible, horrible people. We know that we all mess up and we all make mistakes, and in that sense we are evil. We're not perfect. The point is that God's trying to make is that he's the perfect and the best and the greatest father there will ever be. If even us who aren't perfect can give what is right to our children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give to them? That's what's going on. Jesus is utilizing this idea or this argument of the lesser to the greater. We know we're not perfect. We're not the perfect parents. We never will be. We try. We try to do what's right by our children. We try to help them. We try to do whatever we can to help them grow, hopefully towards God. But we're going to make mistakes along the road. But God is perfect. He can help them in ways that we never can. He can help them in ways that we will never be able to. And so when it comes to being compared to God, even the best parents, and some of you may be some of the best parents out there, we're still nothing compared to God. That's how powerful, that's how wonderful God is. And so that's why he gets to this point of all this, all these illustrations, what they mean for us, what are they supposed to do for us. Well, it might be easy to look at Jesus' illustrations of bread and fish and see the fact that these are physical needs that they have, things that, we understand. We need those physical helps. We need God to take care of us. And the fact is, we know God takes care of us. If you back up just one chapter into chapter 6, verse 33, he says that, if he takes care of all the birds, if he takes care of all this, all that, will he not take care of us? God takes care of our physical needs, but even more so here, what Jesus wants us to understand is it's not just about the physical needs. He is going to help provide the spiritual needs that we have. That is how much more God can give us than even our regular father on this earth. Say, God can give us things to eat, so can our regular father, and so did he. But God can help us in ways that our father never could. Can do things that our earth father could never possibly do. And so that is why these illustrations are so important, have so much meaning to our lives on why we keep asking, why we keep seeking, why we keep knocking. It's because of the spiritual needs we have that only God can see to. Only he can help. So what we get here in the end is this divine guarantee for all truth seekers. It's pretty amazing stuff. Basically, God is laying before us his holy truths. Everything that he has to give, he's laying it at your doorstep. And then what he says is that if you're willing to be a truth seeker, you will be a truth finder. You will find the truth in all things, if you're willing to seek after him. In 1 Timothy chapter 2, it says this, this is good and acceptable in the sight of our God, our Savior, who desires all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. I pulled out the point there that God desires all men two things. He desires that all people have the ability to be saved. He desires all of us to be saved. That's what he wishes for us. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. That is God's desire for you. He wants you to be saved. And the other part of that is that he also wants you to come to a knowledge of the truth. And he's willing to help you find that truth. But you have to seek it out. You have to be willing to look to him and not to yourself. Or not to others, not to me. Go to God. Go to his word. That is where the truth is found. The second part of this is living by the golden rule. This is probably a verse that all of us know pretty well. It simply says, "In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets." You know, a lot of people like to call it the golden rule, but guess what? There's a bunch of rules out there. I don't know if everybody knows this, but just about every belief system in the world, every philosopher in the world has come up with their own version or their own kind of golden rule, so to speak. A lot of people like to call them the silver rules because they're just not quite as good. Just for a few, Confucius said, "What do you want done? What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others." Socrates said, "Whatever angers you when you suffer it at the hands of others, do not do it to others." Aristotle said, when he was asked about how to behave towards friends specifically, he says, "As we should wish them to behave towards us." There was a famous rabbi who said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." And then even from the Apocrypha, the false signatures or whatever you want to call that, these are intertestamental writings that came after the Bible. From the book of Tobit it says, "And what you hate, do not do to anyone." And from the book of Sirach it says, "Judge your neighbor's feelings by your own, and in every matter be thoughtful." These are just a few of the examples of what the other rules are. Now, there's a lot of them, and I could go on and on and on. I'm telling you right now, there is one for every belief system out there. But Jesus' rule is different. And very, very few, I think only one that I've come across is actually like Jesus' rule. His rule is different because it actually requires you to do something. Not just not do something to someone, but to actually do something favorable for other people. He says, treat them the way you want to be treated. He says, don't just ignore them if they're treating you bad. Don't revenge what they bring upon you. But he says, treat them the way you want to be treated, which means you have to go out of your way to help others, to focus your life on their life, to do what you can for them. And in turn, they should be doing the same for you. It's a pretty powerful thing. That's why his rule is truly the golden rule above all other things, because he's calling us to action once again. So the first part of this, he helped us learn how we ought to live and how we ought to focus our lives on God. And now he's trying to help us understand how we need to focus our lives not just on God, but also on others. Does this sound like a pattern we see throughout the Bible, throughout Jesus' teachings? You know, there's that song that we sing, and some people know it, some people don't. There's that kid song that I sang growing up, that J-O-Y, J-O-Y. This is what it means. Jesus first, yourself last, others in between. That is the way it's supposed to go. We focus on God. We focus on Christ. And then we work on helping others. Never caring about ourselves, because we know God takes care of us. And he might take care of us through the work of others, just as he's doing for others through us. Jesus' rule is truly the golden rule in all things. There's nothing that we can say is really better. And that's the matter of the fact. You know, a lot of people say that this is the greatest statement of all time, or at least one of them. There's a lot of wonderful things that are said in the Bible, but this statement alone is pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful. Why? Because if you really think about this statement, if it was actually applied by every single person on the planet, did you know that every bad thing, every ill, every trouble that comes on mankind would go away, would be solved? Now, I'm not saying that there wouldn't necessarily be diseases or there wouldn't be certain things like that, but anything that is person-on-person hate or crime or whatever you want to say, nobody would rob anybody else because they're supposed to think of that person first. How dare I do that to somebody else? I don't want them to do that to me. I need to treat them how I want them to treat me. You can say that about just about any sin that's from one man to another. Think of how wonderful the world would be if this was applied correctly. That is why this is one of the probably most powerful statements that Jesus made. It's a wonderful thing to think about. And that is what we are to learn to do. That's what Jesus wants us to do. This is how we ought to live. We have to learn to treat people a certain way. It's not just about reacting to what they do, but going out and doing something on our part. Treating each other the right way. Treating people outside this room the right way. All the struggles go away if we do that. And the other really crazy thing to think about is at the end of this verse, he tags on this little line that says that basically this encompasses all of the law and the prophets. A statement that is short, one verse. And yet he says everything from the law through the whole Old Testament can be summed up with this one statement. If you're willing to do this in your life, then you'll live the way that all the people back then should have, and maybe didn't. If you want to know how to live the more righteous life, the better life, to live righteously in a better way, if you want to go to heaven as chapter 5, verse 20 we were talking about, only those who are more righteous than the Pharisees, this is how you do it. Live by these examples. Live by the ways that he's talking about here. That is what this sermon is all about. So let's talk a little bit about application for our lives. When it comes to ask, seek, knock, ask is correlated with prayer over and over again all throughout the Bible. So when you're asking God, when you're continually asking God, pray fervently. Pray without ceasing, it says in the Bible. Prayer is an important thing. Don't just ask God once. And I'm not saying you have to ask him once about one thing. I'm just saying don't talk to him once. Keep talking to God. God is always going to be there for you. He's always going to be there willing to listen to you. Don't feel like just because you feel like you're saying the same thing from one prayer to the next, that there's something wrong with that. If you are bleeding your heart out to him, he is listening to you. And he is there for you. And he's ready to help you. Keep asking. God wants to stay in communication with you, always. As far as being a seeker, be a truth seeker. Don't wait for someone like me to come along and explain who God is to you, to explain what God should mean to you. Don't wait for that. Seek him for yourself. Seek after God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, it says in Matthew chapter 22. And I think in Luke it says with all your strength as well. Seek after God. I can't force you to be a truth seeker. That is something you have to do. That is something you have to choose. Make that choice. And keep preserving. Keep knocking. Keep being persistent. Because like I said, we don't have to worry about how long we have to knock. We don't have to worry about how long we have to wait for that door to open. All you have to understand is that if you keep knocking, the day is going to come where that door opens. And how great a day that'll be. Doesn't matter how long. It'll come. Keep knocking. Keep persevering all the way through to the very end. And then as far as the golden rule goes, how do we apply that to ourselves? First, note the fact that it's just a simple statement. It doesn't necessarily use big words. It doesn't try to make anything go over our heads. It's not trying to use any kind of complex argument for being considered one of the greatest statements of all time by people even outside of religious belief systems. That's pretty profound. Such a simple statement can mean so much because it's so easy to understand and it's so easy to apply to your life if you choose to. You have to choose to, though. Second, the statement does not exclude anything or anyone. It is written in such a way that everyone is part of that statement. You don't have the right to treat certain people in a certain way and other people in another way. This is Jesus, this is God showing that there is to be no partiality. You are to treat everyone the same. Treat them the same way you want to be treated. He doesn't even use necessarily the word neighbor here, which we know the Israelites, the Jews, tended to like to define neighbor a certain way, as we've talked about in the past. He says, treat others. That means everybody. Do unto them as you want done to you. Treat them with the same respect that you want, the same goodness that you want to come to your life. And finally, understand this. The statement is not a suggestion. Just like the ask, seek, knock, just like the hunger and thirst, this too is emphatic. This is a command. This is something we are to do. If you truly want to live as a disciple of Christ, this is the way we are to live. This is the things we should be doing. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That is how you live as a Christian. It's an amazing thing, this sermon that Jesus gave in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. It's an amazing thing that we can learn a lot from. It's something that I hope has been gleaning a lot of good information for you, a lot of helpful information for you, maybe to help you better understand God, to better understand Christ, to better understand how to live righteously each and every day. Sometimes it's hard to find the simple step 1, step 2, step 3, this is all you have to do in your life. But I hope this has been helping you through those moments when you're not sure what you should do, when you're not sure maybe how things should go. I hope that if you're out there this morning and you're listening and you have not been living your life this way, that you will make a change. Like I said, don't look to me, don't look to others to make that decision for you. Only you can make the decision to commit your life to God, to give over to Him everything you have, to focus your life on Him, and to treat others the way that they deserve to be treated, the way you want to be treated, the way God expects you to treat them. Or maybe you're here this morning and you have committed your life to God, but maybe you've kind of gotten away from living in the way that you should. Maybe you're ready to get back into the right kind of living, the right kind of acting each and every day. Maybe you just simply haven't been thinking enough about others, thinking enough about God in your own life in the way that you should. And you want to rededicate your mind, rededicate your life in the way that it should be living. We can help you with that too. If there's anything we can help you with this morning, I hope you will come as we stand and sing.